Hey everybody, P.D. Turner, executive producer and host of your Break It Down show. I'm recording from the mountains. That's why I didn't put a show up on Friday, because we're taking a little weekend time off. But that doesn't mean we don't do 5 shows a week on the podcast side. So we are releasing our episode today that we did last week with David Bennett, who is the executive director of the San Diego Opera. And we have a new co-host, a former guest, Marine, Baton 6, Brian Dix. He used to run the President's Own Marine Band, and that's like the prime, that's like one of the prime bands that the president has at his disposal, and they do all kinds of VIP, like VVIP concerts. And so Brian's like, hey, let's do some fine art stuff. You guys know I love opera. And then the San Diego Opera said, hey, we're going to do a drive-in of La Bohème. We're going to get back to the business of putting out content. And so we thought, let's support and start right here. So Brian's going to be bringing us more art-related things and taking some of the stuff we do and then now adding a new edge to it. So we're really looking forward to having Brian be part of the show on a regular basis. And of course, now we go over to David, and David talks about how do you run an opera in a time of COVID and a pandemic and trying to put thousands of people into a venue and have live fine arts, which has proven to be impossible thus far. But as we see things like football and basketball and baseball happening, now opera is happening, and it's pretty neat. So anyhow, that's the point of this show. I think you guys will dig it if you were able to, and maybe you won't have time. But if you're in San Diego, Southern California, between now and November 1st of 2020, for sure, go to SanDiegoOpera.org, get tickets, and go check it out. It's an easy 90-minute opera. Everybody loves La Bohème. You will love it too. One thing real quick, and I'll get on to the next thing. Save the Brave, SaveTheBrave.org. Just click on it, little donation, that'll help. If you want to do something for time, let me know. I'm always got something that we can have you help with. Okay, enough about all that stuff. Here comes David Bennett.
Lions Rock Productions.
This is Jay Moore.
This is Greg Proops.
This is Jordan Harbinger.
This is Dexter from The Offspring.
This is Nathan
This is
East.
Sebastian Younger.
This is Rick Marotta.
This is Stuart Copeland. This is Mick Gillette.
This is Andy Summers.
Hey, this is Skunk Baxter.
This is Gabby Reese.
This is Rob Bell.
Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero.
Hey, and this is Pete A. Turner.
This is David Bennett, and you're watching The Break It Down Show.
And now, The Break It Down Show with John Leon Guerrero and Pete A. Turner.
Yes, always technical difficulties. Brian Dix, who is Baton 6, we've had him on the show before. He ran the President's Own band for the Marines. And that is an enormous job. If you guys haven't listened to his episode, we'll have to do that. He's working on his comms on his end. But let's get started with David. David, I guess, what is it that you do for the San Diego Opera? And we'll go from there.
So general director is sort of an unusual title. It's unique to the opera world. It's the CEO of the opera company, but also the head of the artistic side. So I make the artistic planning, make the decisions on casting, all of that, but I also run the operations of the company. So fundraising, marketing, finance, all of that.
That's quite the gig. So how does one, without getting into what we're going to talk to, how does one run an opera during a global pandemic?
Carefully. So, yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, if you sort of look at what's happening in the industry, most companies that aren't in climates like San Diego have made the decision to really just postpone or cancel production for the time being and doing things virtually online. So that's really kind of what's happening in the country. We are the first traditional opera company in the United States to mount a full opera with live performers and a live audience post-COVID.
Is it because we're in San Diego and the weather is so close to perfect that you can reliably do things outside?
Yeah, I mean, that's a big thing to our advantage. There's also a chamber orchestra here called Mainly Mozart that did some concerts over the summer in a similar format, smaller. But, we are allowed within the County of San Diego's health provision to perform this kind of activity outdoors as long as the audience stays in their cars. We still can't perform outdoors if the audience is outside of cars. They have to remain inside of their cars. So this drive-in format works well for us. Yeah.
Yeah, I imagine that it does. And then who came up with this idea? Has this been done by somebody else in the past to give you the idea?
There's a festival in, actually two things. So English National Opera outside of London did a La Bohème in a similar format this summer. There's a festival in upstate New York called the Phoenicia Festival of the Voice, and they did one performance of a Tosca, another Puccini opera this late in the summer. And then, as I said, mainly Mozart as the chamber music organization here in San Diego. I saw some of their concerts, and after attending their concerts, that's when I thought, we have to give this a try to see if we can make this a go for the Bohème. We already had Bohème planned, right? So we had this production scheduled in this period for inside of a theater. And what happens in the opera world is we typically tend to book our singers out 18 months, 2 years in advance. So I knew I had this amazing cast already engaged, and I just wanted to find a way to make sure that we could bring it to our community safely.
Yeah, that makes sense. Is La Bohème the opera you would choose to do outside, or is there like logistically a benefit to that one over, I don't know, Tales of Hoffman or something?
It's actually a fairly easy one because you can tell the story of it, even though there are scenes that take place in different places. You can tell it scenically without having to change the set, if I can say that in an uncomplicated way. There are other operas that are more complicated. There are probably ones that are less complicated, but the fact that we already had this planned, and when we looked at it and we said, okay, we got a Bohème plan, we've got the perfect cast. If we bring it outdoors, how can we re-envision it outdoors? And also you have to remember, we have to follow safety protocols that have been established by unions that represent our employees, and one of them is singers. And so they established the safety protocols for us to engage these singers, that they each had to have 120 square feet around them. So they have to have their own 120 square feet, and they can't encroach in each other's space for safety, right? So that's another thing, is how do you actually tell the story of La Bohème when people can't touch each other and come close to each other? And we have a really good stage director. So all of those things together, yeah, it's a good story for it. The approach of the stage director and the fact that I had a world-class cast made me say, I've got to find a way to make this work. Yeah.
And then in terms of the logistics, do you still, all operas have intermissions. You serve drinks and snacks and cookies and such. Is that still happening? Is there someone running by the cars? Or?
Yeah, not this opera. No, actually. So one of the things, if you think about 120 square feet per singer, that also holds true for the chorus, right? If we were going to have a chorus, each of them would have to have their own 120 square feet of space, which makes it really impossible to have a chorus, right? So one of the things that we did is we reconceived this opera without a chorus, and we cut the music that the chorus would be singing, which brought the time down to under 90 minutes.
Okay.
The time of La Bohème of real music is a little over 2 hours. So we're able to get it down to about 90 minutes of real music. So with that in mind, we actually eliminated the intermission, and we're through the safety mandates of the County of San Diego, we are not allowed to have concessions or provide anything that would encourage audience to get out of their cars. No concessions, no after party like we normally have for donors. We are providing restrooms, but you can only leave your car to go to the restroom, and you have to have a face covering on when you leave your car. Yeah.
I think we got Brian up, so I'm going to stop hogging all the questions and let him go. Go ahead.
Brian, good to see you.
Good to see you again, David. Well, I'm sorry I missed the very initial part of the broadcast, but, technical difficulties in South Park of San Diego, it does occur. Yeah. Well, I just wanted to start. This all-star cast that you have, you have Ana Maria Martinez and Joshua Guerrero. I have to say that the leading roles from Mimi, Rodolfo, Musetta, and everyone else, this is probably the trimmest cast I have ever seen on an opera stage. Is this a Southern California thing going on?
Well, actually, interesting enough, if you really look at the opera world now, opera singers are certainly more trim than they were 20 years ago, and certainly more trim than 100 years ago. But it just happens that, I don't cast with that in mind, I would say. I just cast for the voices that are appropriate, and also the look and acting ability for the particular roles. It just happened to be that way in this production. We actually had another soprano booked for Mimi, who had to cancel for some personal reasons only a few weeks before we started rehearsals, and Ana Maria Martinez was available, and she's an international star, and we were able to ask her to come and step into that role. But one of the things that's very interesting about this is we have three bilingual cast members. Ana Maria is Puerto Rican, Josh Guerrero is Mexican-American, and also Andrea Carroll is a Spanish-speaking, I think she's originally from Florida, and she's our Musetta. And then, of course, our conductor, Rafael Paare, who's the new music director of the symphony, is another Spanish-speaking member of the cast.
Yes, from Venezuela. And the interesting thing about the Maestro Paere is that in Venezuela, opera is not really a top drawer dynamic in the classical world.
Correct.
And so he didn't study opera, I don't think, until he came abroad.
That's correct. And I think he came to opera a little later. Of course, he's very young. So he has plenty of time to add to his opera chops. But I know that he's done quite a bit. I think he conducted a Glyndebourne recently, and he also was involved with the Castleton Festival, which is an important opera festival that was on the East Coast for a while. So he certainly knows what he's doing. He's a very, very good opera conductor.
Well, and the beautiful thing is that we're talking to an audience, the Break It Down show. So we are literally breaking these things down. and I have always believed is that when people get older and more mature in life, is that their musical taste mature also. Mm-hmm. And here you are, and you're taking a very extremely mature taste of music, and you're actually eliminating the concert hall, which is a difficult line of departure to get involved in opera and classical music. People just don't want to get into that hall. They don't want to get into that scene and getting dressed up and all the hoity-toity things. And you're making a Camden, New Jersey drive-in and getting the family involved. I mean, what was the impetus? What was the absolute impetus for you to make that driving force?
Well, I have to say, one of the reasons I was interested in coming to San Diego and taking this job from New York was because of the climate and thinking about how we could use the climate to our advantage. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, first off, you said climate very quickly and then moved right on. But that is the highlight.
But we have this opportunity here to move beyond the Opera House because of the good weather that we have almost year-round here in San Diego. And so that was in my thinking already about how we could find opportunities to start performing outdoors. And then when this happened to us, of course, the only opportunity that we have right now to have live performers, live audience together in the same experience is in this kind of format. So we actually did look at producing this at a drive-in theater. That was our first idea. We said, well, we have a couple of drive-in theaters here. There's one in Imperial Beach that's rather large. There's one in Santee. But what's interesting now is that the drive-in theaters are getting first-run movies because indoor theaters are, not functioning. So they have the major studios with, inventory lined up, and so for them to actually allow us to take over that drive-in theater for a couple of weeks wasn't possible. So that disappeared. So basically, what we did? We pulled out on Google Maps and we looked at anything that looked like it had big parking. Like, where is the big
thank goodness for Google Maps, right?
Yeah, seriously. Like, look at Pechanga Arena. There's a lot of parking there. Look at, the Charger Stadium now vacant at SDSU. That's big. And so we sort of looked at those kinds of things and said, what are our options to think about? Because clearly you have to understand with the space requirements that we have to build a very large stage, and then of course we have to have enough capacity for cars to make it worthwhile. Yeah.
Now, original opera there was no stages. It was done in the outdoors, correct? So basically, I mean, if we didn't have cars, it'd be carriages.
Correct. That's very, very, very good observation. Yeah.
So actually, you're not doing anything different.
We're circling back. How's that?
Right. Well, and one of the interesting things is that you have a very strong vocal background yourself. You are a singer. You sang in choirs, but you also have artistic chops for artistic administration. And besides running a small opera company, you are also running a dance company in New York.
Right. So I was a singer, and I did start off as I started off as an actor, and then a choral singer, and I played piano and violin and trumpet, but then I studied voice in college, and then wound up singing professionally. Sang opera professionally for about 10 years.
You can say what college. People would be interested to know.
Oh, I went to TCU, Texas Christian University, Horned Frogs, for my undergraduate, and I was based in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and I was teaching voice and I was singing. And as like all singers, it's kind of itinerant. You move around. You go to this city and sing, and then you come back, and taught in between. And then I studied arts management at SMU in Dallas. And SMU was the first university of its kind to do something like this. There are other ones like it now, but that offered an arts management degree that was 2 degrees concurrently, an MA in arts management from the art school and an MBA from the business school at the same time. So I did that, and then that brought me to New York. At the end of that, I applied for a fellowship at Lincoln Center, which I got, and then turned that into a career in New York that I did several things, among them managing director. There was an executive director over me who was actually a dancer, but I was managing director of a dance training and performance institution focused on modern dance. And really what I did with them, I wasn't with them for very long. Mostly what I did was I helped them close out a capital campaign to build a new space for training of modern dance in New York. But I also was a consultant for a while, working in performing arts facilities consulting. So I did feasibility studies when a city or an entity wanted to build a new venue. So I did that kind of work too, which was quite interesting.
So does feasibility studies, does that include examining Google Maps?
It probably does nowadays. It didn't when I was doing it in New York, but a very brief, funny story. My first job with that job, my first project was to go to Reykjavik in Iceland to do the feasibility study for a concert hall that's now been built for the Icelandic Symphony. And my job was to do a operating pro forma. So I had to gather financial statements from all of these arts organizations in Iceland and study them. But of course, they're all in Icelandic. So I had to sit with an Icelandic dictionary and financial statements and translate everything. And that was a interesting first couple of weeks of that job.
and that was long before Google Translate.
Right, exactly. Right. Yeah.
So, but everyone thinks New York is everything we have to achieve, that Lincoln Center, Carnegie Hall level. But you were at areas where you needed to draw more people into seats.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so in my mind, that's one of the primary reasons why they brought you to San Diego. And
yeah.
Since you came here, I mean, the repertoire, you still maintain the Toscas and the Madame Butterflies and the Figaros, but you also make it fun and you make it enlightening with the Pirates of Penzance and soldier songs.
Thank you. The opera company I worked with in New York was called Gotham Chamber Opera, and they focused on repertoire that was intended for small venues, and that kind of gave us a wide berth. It was anything that wasn't grand opera, and basically it made you skip the 19th century, but anything before or after was what we did. But we wound up exploring a lot of unusual places to produce, right? And I think that's what I got to be known for, was finding out ways to explore spaces and that highlighted the repertoire in a way that would be even more than if it was done in a theater. And that's why I believe that San Diego Opera was particularly attracted to me when they did a search, because I had sung traditional repertoire, right, as a singer and as a teacher. So I had my foot in that, but I also produced non-traditional repertoire, and they wanted to explore both here. Yeah.
Now when you're, of course, La Bohème is probably one of the best operas when people are first coming into understanding. I mean, there's other good operas, Barbara Seville and Peter Grimes and Magic Flute. But why did you select La Bohème to be the one that's going to be the drive-in home run for San Diego Opera?
Well, I said this a little bit earlier. I think you weren't on the call on yet, but we book our operas very far in advance. The artist and also our commitment to the musicians of the San Diego Symphony. So we have an understanding 18 to 24 months in advance of what we're doing, and we start to book those artists, right? So I already had this Bohème lined up pre-COVID, and so your choices are then: do you cancel? Do you try to postpone? Do you try to do something else with the singers you already have contracted? Or do you try to find a way to go forward with it? So luckily, I have to say, this was the opera that we had booked, because it's an easier sell because people know about it. And then if they don't know it, once they hear it, they realize they know it because, it was in Moonstruck and it was in Pretty Women. Like all the operas that you see on TV generally are La Bohème. And then, of course, if you know the musical Rent is La Bohème. I mean, it's the exact same story that's been turned into a musical, except Mimi lives at the end, as opposed to Sorry, spoiler alert. If you haven't seen the opera, it doesn't end happy. Let's put it that way.
Let me jump in here, and I want to say a couple things. First off, is if you guys want to see La Bohème through the drive-in, you can go to the San Diego Opera website, which is sdopera.org. And the dates are October 24th to November 1st. That's when they'll be doing it. That's what we're trying to support. Is look, if you're in Southern California and you want to support the arts, which of course you do, here's an opportunity to get out and safely consume the arts. Let me ask you this. One thing I wanted to say too is the last time I was at the San Diego Opera, and it's been too long, but in fairness, for about a year, we haven't been able to go. Yeah. You guys, so for anybody who's like, opera, I don't know. Like, first off, if you are dating someone, it's a great date. And good. Second, when you show up there, you guys have just the most. I've been to a lot of places for opera, Miami, Italy, all kinds of places. You guys have the most friendly atmosphere. You come in, you're instantly greeted. And it makes such a difference for someone who's like, I don't even know where to stand or what to do, Yeah. So I wanted to give you guys credit for that.
I appreciate that very much. That is true. People do feel often that even if they haven't been, there's sort of a fear factor about, will I fit in? Will I know how to behave? What do I wear? And we don't discourage people from getting dressed up, but we also want people to be comfortable. And we also have, to our advantage, when we're back at the Civic Theater where we perform, which is a very large theater, we have an outdoor concourse that's quite big around it. And again, the climate is nice here. So for all of our performances, we have food vendors and some nice market lights that are strung. So it feels like a festive atmosphere outside of the theater, as opposed to just feeling confined inside of the building.
When you're making choices on which operas you guys want to perform, I mean, you got to play the hits, baby. You got to do it, right? But you also want to satisfy, the hardcore opera folks who are like, you never play X, or, force me to go to a new spot. I mean, it's Marriage of Figaro, Tales of Hoffmann, La Bohème, and I'm going to run out real quick here, Indomeneo, whatever, right? Mm-hmm. How do you make those choices so that you're satisfying? I mean, it's such a massive canon of things, but there's just these classics that are always played over and over again. How do you satisfy the crowd?
So right now, we have two series. That's one thing, right? So our main stage series is at the Civic Theater, and those, we do sort of think of those as our cash cow a little bit, because we need those to, nothing's profitable in performing arts. We always lose money whenever we open the doors. We have to have donations to support us to be able to do it, but the ratio of box office is higher at the Civic Theater. We also have another series that's called Detour, which are smaller productions that are less risky financially, so we can have more risk artistically in those, right? So that's one thing that we have. We have anywhere from 5 to 6, generally 6 productions across this spectrum. Now, when we think about what we think of traditional opera, that's on our main stage. And that's a bit of a challenge right now because we only have 3 operas. And so you don't want to go too far down the risk path with those 3 operas. But what you do is, if you have a subscription package like we have, and you encourage people with the benefit of reduced cost and other benefits, if they subscribe, you try to sneak one in there that's a little less of a cash cow and a little more adventurous, to make sure that we're helping people to understand more about opera other than La Bohème and Aida, right? And you just try to balance those. And it is a puzzle. It's a puzzle that is artistic when you lay it all out, and it's a puzzle financially. And so what I have is, I have a whiteboard in my office, and I have all these titles listed up, and they are in rows and columns based upon revenue size and expense size. And we sort of, if we look at a year and we think, oh, that's too big, we take out one of the big puzzle pieces and put it in a different year and a smaller one in terms of cost and revenue. Yeah.
Oh, well, let's discuss a little bit about the audience experience. Now, I don't understand Italian.
Yeah.
Why am I going to an opera and I don't understand the language?
Well, we always have what are called super titles or surtitles, both. Super titles generally means above, at the top of the theater. We always have translations in English of every opera, including if they're in English, because opera singers tend, and the top of the voices particularly, tend to sort of modify the vowels in a tall shape. So sometimes even if you're singing in English, it's hard to understand the English, to be frank. But every opera we do, we have those translations.
And you'll have the translations for the drive-in.
Exactly. This is no exception. Actually, we have more in this because it is a drive-in format. We have 6 very large LED screens throughout the parking lot, and the translations will be on those screens. But we're also encouraging people to bring this with them or an iPad, because we also have the option. We're going to be running through a link on our website the English translations on this. So you can have it with you in your car or your iPad in your car, and you can have the translations nearby. So you're not having to look at various different directions. Yeah.
Well, wonderful. And even if you don't want to read the translations, and if you just want to hit recline and have a cold one.
Totally. Yeah, and we are actually encouraging people, because we're not selling concessions. We're telling people to really make a fun evening out of it, and do go ahead and bring your own food and drink. And exactly, we don't want you to get soused so you can't drive home, but have a nice evening and enjoy yourself in the space of your car, in the safety of your car. And the other thing that you can do with this, which you're never going to be able to do in an opera again, is to roll your windows up and sing along. You're never going to be able to sing along with La Bohème in a theater and stay in the theater. Let's put it that way. So we would say, go for it, right?
Well, yes, and having attended a few operas myself, there's always someone that's behind me that is a rising tenor,
Right. Interesting enough, I think it was LA Opera went to performance last year, and in their pre-performance notes on the the speakers saying, "Please turn off your cell phones," they said, "Please do not sing along," because I think people just now, in the world we're in, where we have headphones on and stuff, people just start making music sometimes when they think they should, right? And yeah, it's not really appropriate in an opera house. In your car, it is. So that's a good thing.
Well, I have a feeling that when you're backstage, is that you're humming along.
Oh yeah, sure, yeah.
Well, that's wonderful. Now, some people want to know. They hear different kind of terms. So, describe what an aria is, for instance.
An aria is a song, really, and the way that we think back in the time of, say, Mozart, which isn't the earliest opera composer, but in that period of the classical composition, we had what we called recitative and aria. And the recitative means reciting. It's a structure where it feels like people are talking and a lot of action happens. And then in the arias, there's more reflection or emotion. And that's evolved over time into the time of this particular opera, Puccini, where you have ensembles and arias. And it generally is a moment where one character is really expressing their feelings, right? So they're singing to another character or they're reflecting, but it's a song. It's a one person singing alone.
And do you think that the aria is probably the most emotional, most love-struck songs that you have?
Yeah, and particularly in this opera, right? There are really beautiful arias that happen between the two characters, Mimi and Rodolfo, who are the lovers, right? In Act 1, where they each sing an aria to each other, whether it's just first stages of love, first moment of meeting, and then they sing a duet as they go off into the next scene.
Yeah. Now, the other thing that most people just don't realize about opera is that it's very saucy.
Oh yeah,
there's a lot of romance. I mean, can you give a little heads up of what's going to be coming on with La Bohème?
Yeah. So La Bohème focuses around. La Bohème is the Bohemians, right? So it's a group of Bohemian people in Paris, that the men that live together in a garret, and a painter and a writer, and so there are 4 of them, and there are 2 characters who wind up having relationships with women that throughout the course of the opera, and Mimi and Rodolfo, who are the main pair, it's a very tender love story. But Musetta and Marcello, it's a very fiery. I don't know how to describe it more than that, but there's a lot of emotion that's heightened, and plates breaking, and so musically, Puccini does an amazing job of contrasting those 2 stories, but they're both love stories, and they, of course, they come together in the 4th act, and I won't give it away again, but in a very beautiful way. Yeah.
Besides arias, there are other songs. I know that we're not doing choruses for this one, correct?
That's correct. But there is, Act 1 ends in a very famous duet between Rodolfo and Mimi. There's an aria that Musetta sings in the second act, but it also has a very big ensemble around it and underneath it. So she sings an aria, so it's by herself, but preceding it and following it is a very big ensemble with all of the singers. It's very big emotion. And then there's also great duet and ensemble singing, and the whole third act is really ensemble, which is really great.
Well, Mimi's Farewell is probably one of the more dramatic and probably one of the highlights that everyone looks forward to.
Right, very tender and sad, but and so I should also tell you this. I mentioned earlier that we have to have this space between the singers, and so the way that the director has allowed us to tell the story of La Bohème and still keep them separated in space is that in this production, the concept is that it's Rodolfo in his study writing probably 10 years in the future after the action of the opera has taken place. And so everyone else is a memory. It's a reflection. So it's Rodolfo in one space and a memory of the interactions at Café Momus and all. But all of his interactions with Mimi, we know that Mimi has died at the end of the opera. So she's, in effect, a spirit. And it's very beautiful in a way, very tender, when they're singing their love duet, and you know that it's a memory of their first time together, but you also know that she's passed, right? There's very beautiful moments in this opera. There's gorgeous moments. In this production, there are particularly beautiful moments.
Well, such as, I know, Act 1, I'm just diving in too deep. Your tiny hand is frozen because of a cold Paris day. One of the most beautiful arias for a tenor. But there's also Musetta's waltz.
Yeah, and that's the big Act 2 aria where she's bossy and we have a very, very beautifully sung but also beautifully acted, funny, physical Musetta. She's great. Yeah.
I wanted to ask a little bit more about the audience experience, because you show up, I've got an Audi A6. It's got this sound system. I've got a Ford F-150. It's got that sound system. I know you can't control for that, but what did you guys think through to try to create? I mean, because obviously sound is of the essence here, what you guys are trying to do. What did you guys think through and how did you work it out, or were you able to accomplish anything?
Well, we did spend a lot of time thinking about this. So we originally thought about having, speaker clusters throughout the parking lot and providing audio source around you. But the latency delay that winds up happening between audio and video, because we also have 6 video screens around, becomes problematic. And so we're using FM radio, and we have an amazing audio designer with several technicians that are mixing. Because we have so many different sources, right? Because the orchestra has their own microphones. Each singer has a microphone. Again, and the big issue of latency and timing between the video feed and the audio, we're just limiting to FM. So most people have decent FM radios in their cars, right? So roll up your windows. But what was interesting last night at the dress rehearsal, I drove pretty much to halfway back, and you can still hear the singers quite well, and they're not amplified in any way. It's just the natural voice. And about halfway back in the parking lot. So if people wanted to roll their windows down, they could still hear that. And the symphony, another thing, singers are on a stage, members of the symphony are on a separate stage if you're in the audience, to your right. And that's for safety concerns because we wanted to keep them separate. So you have these other sources of sound from the musicians. Yeah.
Are people allowed to get out of their vehicles or sit on their hoods or anything?
Not at all. And again, we're trying to be, we're not trying to be mean. We're following the specific advice. We had to create a very rigorous plan that had to be filed and approved with the County of San Diego Department of Public Health, right? There have been smaller things, like I mentioned, mainly Mozart had done something before, but because the number of people we're employing and the audience size that we're anticipating is so much bigger, they're being quite rigorous with this. For instance, we are not allowed to hand out a program. Usually you get a program when you come in. So we've created a digital program, and we're making sure everyone's aware of that. They can read it ahead of time. We'll have information on the screens that directs people to our website, so they can also look at the URL and view the program on your phone while you're waiting. Yeah.
When you look at all the things you've had to adapt to do this, some of this stuff is going to force a positive change for you guys. What do you think you'll keep?
Well, I think, I think in general, being nimble, which is kind of a abstract term, but we're getting good now at turning on a dime. We're not as big as we used to be, but we're not a small organization, and being nimble and being big is sort of a hard thing to square away. So I think that's the biggest observation, is that we're getting good at being crafty and turning, but we're definitely going to explore outdoors more. We're going to be doing more things outdoors. Yeah.
Hey, this is Pete A. Turner from Lions Rock Productions. We create podcasts around here, and if you, your brand, or your company want to figure out how to do a podcast, just talk to me. I'll give you the advice on the right gear, the best plan, and show you how to take a podcast that makes sense for you, that's sustainable, that's scalable, and fun. Hit me up at pete@breakitdownshow.com. Let me help. I want to hear about it.
We're going to be doing more things outdoors. Yeah.
And while you're doing more things outdoors, I know you, like you said, it's very difficult to turn things on a dime, but is this changing the way that you're going to start programming?
I don't think so. It's a good question. I don't think so, because I think we'll still, economically and financially, and the business model that I think feels right for us at this time, that helps us guarantee our fiscal health. Do you remember the opera company almost went away a few years ago? So the size that we are feels right for us in terms of building our stability. So I think we'll be in this model of 3 main stage operas and then a number of other operas in this detour series. However, I could envision that maybe we don't do all 3 at the Civic Theater. Maybe we do a main stage opera outdoors. And definitely, I'm already commissioning some works, some new works that are meant to be performed outdoors for the smaller series also.
Now, the musicians and the artists and all the technical advisors, they are probably just thrilled to death to be involved in this project. What's it like backstage? But tell me about some of the personnel.
Yeah, it's remarkable. So this is the first work that most of the people that are involved in this production have had since March, right? And many of them have other sources of income, but many of them don't. So that's another very important story from this. It's important for us because as a company, it's what we do, and we provide the service that we're meant to provide to this community by performing, but we're also providing work to people that desperately need work. So the comments that people are talking about are heartfelt and really moved by this opportunity, and also the bravery that we're taking to try this, right? There were questions from me early on from members of our board, and they weren't, disparaging in any way, but they were just saying, frankly, to do this, why do we want to take this risk? And I said, because we're an opera company, and it's our job to try to figure it out and try to figure out a way to do this, absolutely guaranteeing safety. And if we can't do it and guarantee safety, then we can't do it. But if we can, we should try. And also, we're going to provide people employment, which is really important, right?
Yeah.
I want people to stay in this field.
Exactly. Yeah.
Opera is a risk. When they say,
yeah. Well, and actually, frankly, I think, we've been able to demonstrate to the county and to our audience that, frankly, going to CVS or going to the grocery store is more risky than going to the opera, because we've spent so much time and so much effort. We created a baseline. Every person involved in this had to test negative. We did a COVID test on everybody. So we established that baseline of negativity. We have an app that we have to check in every day and answer a series of questions. If anyone's symptomatic, they're pulled out. We retest. Knock on wood, no one has had a symptom yet. So we have a strategy for what would happen if someone did test positive. We spent a lot of time, very rigorous time, thinking about this.
The NBA and MLB have done a very good job considering all of the variables and how long ago they started doing this. That for sure is the thing. But there are other elements of safety that you still have to account for, and now you're in a new venue. So I'm thinking back, I think 3 years ago, they at the VA in LA, they did a presentation of Falstaff live outside under the stars. Gorgeous, like the Getty off in the distance, the sunset, the whole thing. The night we were there, went off without a hitch. Tom Hanks is Falstaff, and there's all kinds of very notable people on there. The night after, they had an old guy who fell over in his chair, and they're like, everything stops. And so Tom Hanks does what Tom Hanks does. He improvised for 45 minutes until medical help came, and the guy ultimately ended up being all right. But these things happen, and surely it's happened at the theater, but you have a system in place where you guys can, deal with it, and it's fairly contained. You're at a drive-in, there's going to be an ambulance driving right up to a car or something.
And we're not a place. We're at the sports arena. Pachango Sports Arena is called now, which is not in a particularly quiet part of the city. There's not a lot of noise, but the freeway runs pretty nearby, so you have this sort of background of noise. So you're right. You can't control the weather, right? So there's things you just can't control. We've made plans. We've contracted Ace Parking, which is the big parking company here, to assist us with all of the parking in and out, but they also know how to manage safety issues. And we've created a very detailed plan to provide egress. And, we have to have an emergency path that goes in front of the stage and along all the sides. So all that's part of the planning. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, when we were talking about risk before, one of the simplest things that could have been done is just saying, hey, we're going to do recorded music. But you made the conscientious decision to say, no, we're going to do it right if we're going to get more people in. So we're going to have the symphony here.
Yeah.
And so can you discuss a little bit about that process?
Yeah. So, we've been cultural partners with the San Diego Symphony for years, right? So there was a time where we had our own orchestra many years ago, and we contracted musicians on our own and had our own agreement with the musicians union. At a certain point, we then made the decision, way before me, to enter into a subcontracting agreement with the symphony, which is the best decision we could have ever made. So every musician that we hire is a member of the San Diego Symphony. It's important for us, and it's important for them, because this also provides them the ability to work. They are a contracted symphony with employees, and they are guaranteed a certain number of weeks of work. So by doing this with the musicians and not doing it with piano, right, then we're able to help them with their commitment, the symphony with their commitment to the musicians as well. Plus, it needs to be with live music if there's any way to do it. It just is what it's meant to be. Yeah.
Yeah. Along to the negotiation with the unions and these other elements that are external, it's one of the things in the arts, like in the film industry, we'd love to start. You have to convince us that you're not going to kill the people in the union. And then are other unions looking at what you're doing to see, is this feasible? Because I know Chicago wants to get running. Everybody wants to have Miami can follow you guys. Is that already happening?
Yeah. I think the thing is, so because we have good weather, we're sort of ahead of a lot of cities, right? So we're in terms of the calendar. A lot of people just made the decision to say, we're basically postponing or canceling the season, and we'll do a lot of internal work, and we'll do Zoom things for our donors and that kind of stuff. So that's kind of what's going on this year. I think everyone's thinking about the next year now and how they can start to produce outdoors during the time of year that it's good for them. So I've gotten lots of calls in the past couple of weeks from general directors of other opera companies asking how we're doing this. We spend a lot of time with we have 5 separate collective bargaining agreements with different unions.
Wow.
And so we had to spend a lot of time figuring that out. And then again, we don't have an agreement with the union that represents the musicians, but we have an agreement with the symphony. So we had to spend a lot of time with the symphony. And I'll tell you, we didn't get to the final yes of the health and safety details until a week and a half ago with some of them. Yeah. So it was a little nervous making, but we knew we were going to get there because we were working on it. And again, for me, the safety was paramount. So I was willing to concede a lot of things because if it's in the benefit of safety, we're going to do it. Right.
Right. Now, there are a lot of eyes on San Diego Opera. And there's a lot of eyes that are looking forward to success because there are not only classical artists, but there's pop and rock and bluegrass, and they want to know how it's going to be done.
Yeah.
And there's also people that say, never going to work. They're looking for that nosedive, sir.
Somebody's got to take a risk. And, I think that's fine. I'm not afraid of that. I think we should explore it. And again, as I said to my staff and to the board, when we said we want to go down this path and explore, we may at the end of the day not actually be able to do this, but you're only going to know that if you try. And if you don't try, you're not going to know. And I do think it's important that we serve as a model to other people in the industry. We had a board meeting on Tuesday, and a board member asked me, "So, David, do you think this is a way that we can monetize this and you can you can be a consultant to other companies?" I was like, "No, that's actually not the right approach. We should just do it. And then if anybody wants to learn from us, they should learn from us. That's the way that it should be done." Yeah.
So in other words, you are taking copious notes through the entire process.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we have a great production team, right? That are full-time members of our production staff, and it's their business. They have the history of actually recording everything for the future, right? In case it's done again. Anytime we produce anything in the theater, you wind up with what's called a show Bible, which is all the documentation of everything. And that way, the next company that does that same physical production can have that as a reference point, right? And we're certainly taking lots of notes. Yeah.
When you do an oh my gosh eye roll, there's a lot of things you've had to deal with to get to. I mean, 5 different collective bargaining agreements, the county, the city, Pachanga, everybody. What kept you up at night?
Interesting enough, not a lot has kept me up at night in this, because we did it in a very orderly process, and really started with thinking about safety. And once we got to the point of getting the county behind us, I knew it was gonna work. And it was just orderly, moving forward, checking things off. I already knew I had a great cast. So, I knew I had that asset, that if I could just figure out the path to get that to a yes. Other thing that I have to mention is that we hired a safety officer. So a contract former Marine.
A Marine veteran. This is what I'd like to hear.
Damn it. Come on, Army.
How come he's not on the synopsis page? I want the biography.
He's in the program, but he's not on the synopsis page. And he worked, of course, in doing a lot of logistics work, right? And he also has a background in public health. So we hired him on a contract basis to really oversee all of our safety coordination of all of the needs and communicating with the county. And once we had him in place, I guess before we had him, I did have a couple of sleepless nights, but once we had him, yeah.
And who in the county was probably the biggest push to say, yes, we have to do this?
Once we got on the radar of the head compliance officer for the Department of Public Health, he's in charge of all reopening planning. Once we got on his radar, he was a big advocate, because he wants us to be a model for other arts organizations to follow. And it's one of the things he's sort of requiring of us is to share our safety plan with anybody that wants it, because you have to file a detailed safety plan. And there's no reason to reinvent the wheel, right?
Oh, that's absolutely true. And then all of a sudden, is that once it starts falling into line, now all of a sudden all these offices and agencies are taking credit, correct?
Well, I wouldn't say that. No, not to my face. So I'm not hearing that. Yeah.
And you said you had your dress rehearsal last night.
We have our final dress tonight. We had our first dress rehearsal last night. We had what we call a Sitzprobe. So for those of you that don't speak German, Sitzprobe means sitting rehearsal. And it is the first time that you put the orchestra and the cast together in the theater. And the reason they call it a Sitzprobe usually means that you sit in chairs, and it's the singers not focusing on their staging. They're really focusing on the relationship with the orchestra. We had that 2 nights ago. So, opera is an iterative process. You build up towards opening night. Tonight is our last rehearsal. We have tomorrow night off, and then we open on Saturday.
Now, I can honestly say that in the Marine Corps, anytime there's a mission, and to us, opera, performance, ceremony is a mission, is that it's called 5-paragraph order. And the fifth element is something that everyone always seems to forget, and it's the one that they work on, the one that's the most aggravating to think about, and it's time and temperature. Are you looking at the weather report for this weekend?
Yeah. And I will say that there is rain predicted late Saturday night, so we'll be fine, because this is a 90-minute performance. We start at 7:30. Audience members will be leaving between 9 and 9:30, so we should be fine. And then I think the last time I saw it, everything's can change, but Tuesday looked good, and it looked good for the rest of the week. So absolutely.
Well, I can honestly say, having made a career of doing outdoor performances, that when there's ever a threat of weather and you are relied on to make the decision, regardless of your decision, you will always be wrong.
Of course.
Someone's going to say, you should have gone out or you should have held back.
Right.
So, I mean, just stand the firm ground. I mean, I understand completely.
Weather is one of the things that we cannot control. Right.
One of my favorite weather performance stories is Prince at the Super Bowl show in Miami, and he was going to do a whole purple rain thing, and then it was storming like even hard for Florida, and the producers freaking out because the halftime show and it's going to be wet and there's dancers and everybody's wearing heels, and so they nervously call up Prince and they say, "Oh my God, Prince, it's raining harder than it's ever rained before. Are we going to be okay?" And he's like, "Can you make it rain harder?"
That's great.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah, that's good for your back pocket when those guys are like, "It's kind of cold." You're like, "Let's make it colder. Let's dig in." Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah, but on a cool night with a threat of rain, I mean, all it does is it just adds to the excitement of performance.
Of course. I'll tell you a quick story that when I was producing in New York, we produced an opera at the Brooklyn Botanic Garden, and we only had one day to tech it because we had to tech it. Yeah, we had teched it on Father's Day, and then the next day we opened. And tech went beautiful, sunny, gorgeous. Day of the opening, it started to rain. And I got a text from the director, and she was on the Upper West Side, and she said, "David, it's raining on the Upper West Side." I said, "Well, the Upper West Side is not Brooklyn, so I get it. But I'm headed out that way." And by the time I had gotten there, it had poured rain. But it was 3 p.m, and there was steam coming off the grass, and I started to freak out. And I thought, you know what? All we can do is just hope. And it all dried out. And the sky was pink with white clouds in it at sunset. And behind the stage, there were rabbits hopping through the garden. And I was like, okay, that's what rain just brought us, which is a beautiful thing, right? You can never make that happen in a theater. Right.
The same thing happened at the Hollywood Bowl. They were doing a 30th anniversary of The Little Mermaid. And so they had, Leah Michelle was singing, and it's Hollywood. So they bring in all these great people in, and it just rained enough so that you're like, oh, it's raining. And then on the Hollywood Bowl and on the screens, they have all the rain falling throughout the show. So it was like you were in this immersive experience. If it had rained any harder, and this place was packed, we probably would have lost half the crowd, but you never really got fully cold. Yeah. It was just, and no one brought an umbrella. I mean, come on, it's
right.
But it was perfect. It was great. You were like this immersive experience where the rain and the water, it was a wonderful thing. So it'll work out. I'm sure it will.
We're going to be good.
Now, I want to discuss Act 3.
Okay. Yeah.
Act 3. Now, having been at Pechanga for a number of events, people want to leave early to beat the traffic.
Yeah.
And what is your advice?
Well, in this opera, if you leave early, you're going to miss the whole opera because it concludes with the surprise. And it's also the most poignant part of the opera. Is beautiful and heartfelt, and particularly in the staging when you see that she had been a ghost in effect. So you need to stay to the end. I'm just going to put that in general of this opera, even if you're seeing it indoors or wherever. But at Pechanga, you're going to be one of 500 cars probably on opening night or more. Again, we've hired Ace Parking. They're used to getting in and out 7,000 cars in that parking lot when there are big concerts at Pechanga. So they have a very detailed plan for how to get people in and out. And we have many more exits than we have entrances. Let's just put it that way. There are a lot of exits that they open up on side streets, onto Kurtz and onto other streets that they don't have open at the beginning of the performance. So they're confident they can clear it out in no time at all.
Now, go ahead.
When the show is over, will there be a chorus of honking cars, and will you encourage that with signs for honk? Because we want to thank them for sure.
Totally. So actually, I do a speech we call a pre-curtain speech for every performance, and so I wrote it in effect yesterday, and I tested it out last night. And I am going to tell people, we want you to show your appreciation. You normally do that by applauding. So you have two options here. One is to honk, and one is to flash your lights. Now, if you flash your lights, please turn them back off. So you don't have your lights on during the rest of it. So yeah, we're encouraging people to honk and show their appreciation. Yeah.
Well, this is also Southern California, so there may be some backfire on the older vehicles.
Well, that's true. You know what we're doing though? We're also communicating very clearly. Like, if you're having any issues with your battery, because if you're leaving your car running, but the power on to listen to your radio, but not with the engine running, we've got Ace ready to go with jumper cables if they need to. And one of my instructions from the stage is if you have a problem, raise your hood and they'll come and help you out.
Oh, delightful. For many years, I'm just one of these junkies that anytime there's after a performance, I'm always at the stage door.
Yeah.
Just so I can go ahead and greet. And I'm just probably familiar that's not going to happen. There's no opportunity for anyone to greet.
Unfortunately, no. And, we always have an opening night cast party with our donors, and we're not doing that. Like, it's one of the really sad things about this experience is we love to tell the artists how much we appreciate them after that opening performance and let them celebrate together. And we just can't do that. We're not able to do it in this environment.
Would San Diego Opera consider possibly maybe after opening night, if the members of the audience wanted to do a Zoom with several of the cast?
It's not a bad idea. We'll have to see if they are willing, of course. We always have to ask them to do those things. They're a very generous cast. Anna Maria Martinez, our Mimi, taught some of our high school students through our education program the other day. She gave them virtual Zoom voice lessons just because she's that kind of person, right? So they're all very generous, but that's not a bad idea. We have several Zoom activities. I have one this afternoon with donors that we do throughout the week, and that might be a nice opportunity next week just to have people say tell them what they thought. Yeah.
Such excitement in the air. Opening night is Saturday after what? 7-8 month recess.
Yeah.
It's going to be hard for them not to run on this stage. Just belting it out.
They're thrilled. I mean, they're so excited to be working again and doing the thing that they do, sing, right? And be here with us. And it's just the chemistry of this cast is amazing. They're all very generous, starting off at a very high level of singing. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you a story. Scott Sykin, who is a member of the cast, who's a local singer, sings what we call comprimario roles. Those are the smaller roles, but he lives here. He's a fine singer. He sings with us a lot. This is his 6th La Bohème with San Diego Opera. Now, we do La Bohème about every 5th year. So that means he's been doing La Bohème in San Diego for 30 years. And he came up to me after the rehearsal on Saturday. We ran through everything together and said, David, this is the best Bohème cast we've ever had in San Diego. And he's so excited to be a part of it. So, yeah.
Oh, this is fabulous. I mean, Saturday, October 24th, it's going to be news. It's going to be not only for San Diego County, Southern California. I'm hoping that the dozens and dozens of people that follow me on Twitter, so I'll get someone to come in, a few of them to come in or tell their friends. I mean, this is just to be absolutely fantastic. I mean, and you don't have to like opera, but it's just getting out there and being together and being with your neighbor. I mean, this is what it's all about.
It's a communal experience, and we haven't had a chance to do that in such a long time. So I agree. Yeah,
I appreciate you doing it. Anybody who's looking on the screen right now, you can see the link. Basically, just go to sdopera.org and you can get tickets there. I'm planning on trying to go. We've got to get down from Orange County, so we got to figure logistics out. But I love it. I love La Bohème.
You can support San Diego by, spending the night in town. We do have hotels here and a few restaurants and a little place called Little Italy.
We do spread my money, Brian Dix.
we do have a link for hotels on our website, just so you know. So if you need a little help with that, we'll help you out.
Yes, for sure. And for sure, the best Mexican food in the country by far.
You got it. Yeah.
All right. Let me sign off. Thank you so much for doing this for us, David. I appreciate it. You're doing great work. Thank you for getting the arts back out in front of us. We desperately need these kind of things to come back in some form or fashion.
Thank you so much for the time today, and really appreciate your help.